Clara Alice has always been a dedicated woman who was passionate about what she did. At 36, she excelled as a social worker, finding satisfaction in helping others overcome their difficulties. Her work was demanding, but she was always willing to do her best. This selfless spirit was one of the qualities that most attracted Giordano, the man she had been married to for 5 years. Clara Alice and Giordano's relationship began intensely and passionately. They met at a charity event organized by an NGO where Clara Alice worked as a volunteer. Giordano, a successful businessman, was there to make a substantial donation. When their eyes met for the first time, something magical happened. They started talking and realized that, although their professional lives were very different, they had many values and dreams in common. The first years of marriage were marked by almost perfect harmony. Giordano was a loving and attentive husband, always willing to support Clara Alice in her professional endeavors. He often praised her commitment to her work and admired the way she managed to balance the demands of her profession with taking care of the home and their relationship. Clara Alice, in turn, insisted on taking care of Giordano. She loved preparing special dinners for him and planning little surprises to keep the romance alive. Even with the rush of everyday life, she always found time to show him how important he was in her life. They didn't have children, but that was never a problem for them. They were both focused on their careers and made the most of the time they had together. Despite the long working hours, Clara Alice and Giordano made a point of taking time for themselves. They enjoyed spending their weekends exploring new restaurants, traveling to quiet destinations, or simply enjoying each other's company at home. Life seemed to follow a harmonious rhythm, and Clara Alice felt grateful to have found a partner who shared her aspirations and understood her professional responsibilities. However, even in the most solid relationships, routine can begin to creep in, bringing with it small cracks. In recent months, Clara Alice began to notice that Giordano was more distant, too involved with work, and less present at home. She believed it was just a phase, a reflection of their growing professional demands. But that nagging feeling that something was changing didn't leave her. The long nights of lively conversations and excited plans for the future began to give way to prolonged silences and hurried meetings. Clara Alice tried not to give it too much importance, convincing herself that everything would return to normal soon. And so, as Clara Alice struggled to maintain a balance between her responsibilities and her marriage, a subtle restlessness began to settle in her heart. She didn't know it yet, but those small changes were about to trigger a series of events that would change her life forever. Clara Alice and Giordano's routine, for many years, seemed to be an example of balance between personal and professional life. Clara Alice, with her dedicated nature, managed to find time to look after Giordano's well-being, even with the constant demands of her work as a social worker. Clara Alice always made sure Giordano had everything he needed. She prepared your favorite meals, remembered important dates, and made sure to create a welcoming and harmonious environment at home. Her desire to provide comfort and happiness to her husband was evident in every detail of her daily life. Giordano, in turn, used to appreciate these gestures of affection, although he did not always express his gratitude explicitly. The relationship between them was marked by moments of tenderness and complicity. On weekends, Clara Alice and Giordano liked to walk through the park, talking about their plans and dreams. They shared a mutual admiration for each other's work, and although Clara Alice often worried about the challenges Giordano faced in the corporate world, she was always there to offer a shoulder and words of encouragement. However, not everything was perfect. Giordano, despite his kindness, had a selfish side that sometimes surfaced. There were times when he seemed to forget Clara Alice's needs and feelings, prioritizing his own interests and ambitions. These attitudes, although rare, planted small seeds of resentment in Clara Alice's heart. She tried to brush it off, convincing herself that they were just minor lapses in an otherwise solid relationship. In recent months, Clara Alice began to notice significant changes in Giordano's behavior. He was increasingly busy, immersed in his professional responsibilities. Overtime at the office became frequent, and work calls over dinner became common. Clara Alice, initially, wasn't worried. I knew that Giordano was dedicated to his work and that more intense phases were normal in any career. But the distance between them began to become palpable. Giordano, previously so present and attentive, now spent more time on his cell phone, responding to messages and emails even during moments that should have been exclusively theirs. Clara Alice tried to adapt, taking care of her own responsibilities and interests, but she couldn't ignore the growing feeling of disconnection. Conversations, once fluid and full of life, became monotonous and superficial. Clara Alice asked about Giordano's day, but received vague and distracted answers. When I tried to share something about his own day, I noticed that he was barely paying attention, too caught up in his own thoughts. Nights of walking together became rare, replaced by long hours in which Giordano was absorbed in his cell phone or laptop. Clara Alice didn't know how to approach this change. She wondered if she was being too demanding, if she should just wait for this phase to pass. I tried to bring up the deep and meaningful conversations they used to have, but Giordano always seemed tired or out of time. Clara Alice's frustration increased, but she remained patient, waiting for her husband to realize what was happening. The emotional distance between them was a new experience for Clara Alice. She didn't know how to deal with it, and every attempt at rapprochement seemed to fail. Despite this, Clara Alice continued to care for Giordano, hoping that the love and attention she gave would be enough to bring back the connection they were losing. And so, while Clara Alice tried to maintain balance amid the changes, a part of her began to question whether that phase would really pass or whether they were, in fact, facing something deeper and more worrying. Clara Alice's routine underwent an unexpected change when, due to an internal reorganization at the social center where she worked, she was transferred to the day shift. The news took her by surprise, but she quickly saw the benefits. She would finally have free nights to spend more time with Giordano and resume some activities she had put aside. Excited about the possibility of surprising Giordano, Clara Alice sent him an email, informing him about the shift change and suggesting that they could enjoy more time together during the evenings. However, as the hours passed and the day turned into night, she noticed that she had received no response. Trying not to worry, Clara Alice convinced herself that Giordano was simply too busy at work and would check his email later. The following days, however, began to draw a disconcerting pattern. Giordano arrived home late almost every night, always with an excuse ready about last-minute meetings or urgent projects. Clara Alice, now with her nights free, tried to wait for him, preparing special dinners and creating a welcoming environment for when he arrived. But instead of the expected reunion, she found an exhausted and distant man. Giordano seemed to be in another world, with his mind always somewhere else. He ate little, answering Clara Alice's questions with monosyllables or distractions. The sparkle in his eyes, which Clara Alice loved so much, seemed to have faded. She noticed that he spent even more time on his cell phone, answering messages incessantly, even during dinner. Hoping to re-establish the connection, Clara Alice suggested that they walk together again after dinner, as they did before. It was an opportunity to talk and enjoy each other's company, away from technological distractions and the stress of everyday life. However, Giordano almost automatically refused, saying he needed these walks alone to clear his head. These rejections were a blow to Clara Alice. She tried not to take it personally, remembering that Giordano was under a lot of pressure at work, but the frustration and worry were beginning to accumulate. She wondered if there was something more he wasn't sharing, something beyond professional stress. Clara Alice tried not to jump to conclusions, but Giordano's emotional absence was beginning to erode the security she had always felt in her marriage. Instead of talking openly about their concerns, it seemed as if an invisible wall had risen between them, blocking any attempt by Clara Alice to get closer. Lonely nights have become a new norm. Clara Alice stayed awake, waiting to hear the door open, waiting to feel Giordano's warmth beside her. But even when he finally returned, the distance between them seemed insurmountable. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning with unanswered questions. No matter how much Clara Alice tried to find a way to reconnect, Giordano remained impenetrable. The lack of clear communication and emotional disconnection were beginning to erode the trust and love that once blossomed effortlessly. And as the days turned into weeks, Clara Alice couldn't ignore the growing feeling that something was deeply wrong. As the weeks turned into months, Clara Alice's concern grew. Giordano's behavior showed no signs of improvement. On the contrary, he seemed even more distant. Overtime at work became a constant, and he avoided any attempt to be close to Clara Alice. The excuses piled up, and the lack of communication was palpable. Clara Alice struggled to understand what was happening. She talked to friends and colleagues, trying to find some logical explanation. Maybe Giordano was going through a personal or professional crisis that he didn't want to talk about. However, the lack of answers and the growing feeling of abandonment began to weigh on her. One night, while mentally reviewing the past few months, Clara Alice began to notice worrying patterns. Giordano's excuses were always the same, and he seemed to avoid looking directly at her when he talked about work. Furthermore, he spent more and more time on his cell phone, often moving away to answer calls or respond to messages. Distrust began to take shape. Clara Alice knew she needed answers, but she also understood that confronting Giordano directly could lead to denial or more lies. It was then that she decided to take a more drastic step, hiring a detective agency to investigate her husband's behavior. The decision was not easy. Clara Alice felt guilty for distrusting Giordano to such an extent, but the lack of transparency and the abrupt change in her behavior justified the action. She needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. After a brief search, Clara Alice found a detective agency with good recommendations. He scheduled a meeting and, on the scheduled day, met with the detective responsible, an experienced man named Roberto. In the agency's waiting room, Clara Alice felt her heart beating faster. When she was finally called, Roberto received her with an understanding look and professionalism. Clara Alice explained her situation, detailing Giordano's suspicious behavior and her growing concerns. Roberto listened attentively, taking notes while Clara Alice spoke. In the end, he assured that he understood the situation and would do his best to find out the truth. They agreed to stay in regular contact, and Roberto promised to update Clara Alice on any developments. The following days were a mixture of anxiety and hope. Clara Alice tried to maintain her routine, but her mind was always focused on the investigation. Every time Giordano left work late or stepped away to answer a call, she wondered if Roberto had discovered something yet. After a week of agonizing waiting, Clara Alice received the first update from Roberto. He reported that he was following Giordano and had already noticed some suspicious behavior, such as frequent meetings in a cafe with an unknown woman. Although there was still no conclusive evidence, the preliminary evidence was enough to justify continuing the investigation. Clara Alice felt a mixture of relief and despair. Relief at knowing he wasn't imagining things, and despair at being closer to confirming his worst suspicions. She knew that regardless of the outcome, her life would change forever. The days passed slowly, with Clara Alice trying to maintain the appearance of normality. She continued her daily activities, but each message from Roberto left her in a state of tension. Finally, after 2 weeks of investigation, Roberto asked to meet her again. At the meeting, Roberto revealed that he had concrete evidence that Giordano was involved with another woman. Photos, records of meetings, and even messages exchanged between them confirmed the infidelity. Clara Alice felt a wave of emotions: sadness, anger, betrayal. She thanked Roberto for his work and left the agency with her head full of thoughts. The truth was in front of her, raw and painful. Clara Alice knew she needed to act, but she also understood that it would be a difficult process. She made a decision. She would confront Giordano and demand answers. It was time to regain control of your life and take steps to protect your future. The evidence provided by Roberto confirmed what Clara Alice feared, but part of her still couldn't believe it. For her, it was impossible to reconcile the image of the man she loved with the actions he was allegedly committing. Deciding to see for herself, Clara Alice decided to follow Giordano on one of his extra work days. It was a Thursday night when Clara Alice put her plan into action. Knowing that Giordano had a late meeting, she left work and headed to his company. She parked the car at a safe distance, staying hidden in the shadows as she watched the main entrance. Time seemed to pass slowly as she waited. Finally, around 8 at night, Clara Alice saw Giordano leaving the building. He was on the phone, talking excitedly as he walked toward the parking lot. Clara Alice held her breath and carefully followed him from a distance. Giordano got into the car and headed towards a residential neighborhood. Clara Alice kept a safe distance, following the taillights of Giordano's car. He parked in front of a cozy house with a small garden in front. Clara Alice parked a few blocks away and continued on foot. When she approached the house, Clara Alice saw Giordano get out of the car and look around. His heart was beating fast. He seemed to be waiting for someone. After a few minutes, a woman left the house and walked towards Giordano. They hugged and then got into her car, laughing and talking like old friends. Clara Alice felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Tears filled her eyes as she watched the two walk away. The reality of Giordano's betrayal materialized before her. She felt devastated, as if the ground had collapsed beneath her feet. It was a feeling of deep emptiness, mixed with anger at having been deceived. Clara Alice knew she needed more proof before making any drastic decisions. I needed the full evidence from Roberto's investigation to be completely sure. With a heavy heart, she got back into her car and drove back home, reflecting on what she had witnessed. In the days that followed, Clara Alice tried to act normally around Giordano, but every time he left to work, the anguish inside her increased. Updates from Roberto arrived regularly, bringing more information that corroborated what she had already seen. Finally, one night, Clara Alice decided she couldn't wait any longer. He picked up the phone and called Roberto, asking to meet him the next day. It was time to know all the details, no matter how painful they were. In Roberto's office, Clara Alice received the final investigation report. There were photos, records of meetings, and even conversations that Giordano had exchanged with the other woman. Every piece of evidence was like a knife stuck in his heart, but it also gave him the clarity he needed to make the decision he had been putting off. On the way home, Clara Alice felt a mix of sadness and determination. She knew that confronting Giordano would be difficult, but she could no longer live in the shadow of doubt and betrayal. It was time to face the truth and take control of her life again. The atmosphere was tense in Clara Alice's house. She had spent the night awake, absorbing all the evidence Roberto had given her. The next morning, still distraught, she got ready for work. Before leaving, he received an unexpected call from one of Giordano's colleagues, warning him about a robbery at his company the night before. Clara Alice immediately called Giordano, but he answered in a cold and distant manner. "Hi, Jordan. I heard about the robbery at your company. Are you well?" she asked, worried. "I'm fine, Clara. It was just a scare." "It's nothing for you to worry about," he replied, without any trace of emotion in his voice. Giordano's indifference cut Clara Alice deeply. She expected a warmer reaction, something that showed he still cared about how she felt. But his coldness only reinforced what she already knew. He was no longer present in their relationship. Determined to resolve the situation, Clara Alice decided that that night would be the night of the confrontation. When he got home, he prepared a simple dinner and waited for Giordano. When he finally walked through the door, she noticed the same absent and tired expression as always. "We need to talk, Giordano," said Clara Alice, trying to keep her voice steady. "Of course, what was it?" he replied, sitting at the table without looking directly at her. "I know about your infidelity," said Clara Alice, bluntly. "I hired a detective and I have all the evidence. I know about the other woman." Giordano's face turned pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. For a moment, Clara Alice thought he might try to deny it, but he just sighed and looked at the floor. "Clara, I don't know what to say. Things between us changed and I made a mistake." The verbal confirmation was like a stab in Clara Alice's heart, but it also brought a sense of relief. The truth was finally exposed, and there was no more room for secrets or lies. "I'm moving to my parents' house tomorrow," said Clara Alice, her voice firm. "I've already spoken to a lawyer, and I'm going to start the divorce process." Giordano looked shocked, but didn't try to stop her. He just nodded, accepting Clara Alice's decision without a fight. Perhaps, deep down, he knew that this was the only possible outcome. The next morning, Clara Alice packed her bags. With the help of his parents, he transported his things to their house. During the process, he felt a mixture of sadness and relief. She was leaving behind years of memories, but also freeing herself from a relationship that had become toxic and unsustainable. Her parents welcomed her with open arms, offering all the support and comfort she needed. As the days went by, Clara Alice began to adjust to her new routine. He began the divorce process and began to focus more on his work and his own needs. Despite the pain of separation, Clara Alice began to realize that this new phase of her life was an opportunity to rebuild herself. Over time, she began to rediscover old hobbies, like yoga, and reconnect with friends she had left aside during her marriage. With each passing day, Clara Alice felt stronger and more confident in herself. She knew the journey to recovery would be long, but she was ready to face each challenge with courage and determination. And, above all, she was determined not to let Giordano's betrayal define the rest of her life. So, with the help of her parents and friends, Clara Alice began to write a new chapter in her life. A chapter that would be filled with self-discovery, growth, and eventually hope for a better future. The morning sun illuminated Clara Alice's new apartment, a small, cozy unit on the third floor of a quiet residential building. The boxes were scattered around the room, but unlike the chaos it would normally represent, Clara Alice felt excited. It was the beginning of a new phase, and she was determined to make this space a true home. His parents were instrumental during this transition. They helped her pack her things from her parents' house and move them to her new apartment. During the following weeks, as Clara Alice unpacked and organized her things, her parents were always nearby, offering help and words of encouragement. "Let's put this shelf here, Clara. It will look great with your books," suggested his mother, helping to position a piece of furniture in the room. "Good idea, Mom. And thank you for everything." "You have been incredible," replied Clara Alice, with a grateful smile. Meanwhile, Clara Alice continued to dedicate herself to her work as a social worker. Immersing herself in her professional responsibilities was an effective way to keep her mind busy and find purpose in helping others. Seeing his clients' progress and knowing he was making a difference in their lives gave him a deep sense of accomplishment. But Clara Alice knew she couldn't just work to overcome her pain. She needed balance and found it by intensifying her yoga and meditation practice. Soon, Clara Alice's mornings began with a yoga session on the living room rug, followed by a few minutes of meditation. These practices became an anchor in her routine, helping her find peace and clarity amid the emotional storm she was experiencing. On nights when she wasn't working, Clara Alice explored new hobbies and activities. She started painting, something she always wanted to do but never found the time. The canvases and brushes spread throughout the apartment were proof of his determination to reinvent himself and discover new passions. Weekends were dedicated to walks in the local park, where Clara Alice could breathe fresh air and enjoy the tranquility of nature. Sometimes she would take a book and spend hours reading under the shade of a tree, finding comfort in the stories of others. As the months passed, Clara Alice began to feel lighter. She still had moments of sadness and longing for what had once been her marriage, but these feelings no longer dominated her. Instead, there was a growing sense of hope and possibility. She also began to reconnect with old friends and make new ones. Dinners, walks, and laughter filled the free moments, bringing a new lease of life to your routine. Clara Alice realized that, despite the difficulties, she was surrounded by people who loved and supported her. On one such night, as Clara Alice meditated in the living room, she felt a deep peace. For a moment, all the challenges and pain of the past disappeared, and all that was left was the clarity that I was on the right path. "I'm rebuilding my life, one step at a time," she whispered to herself, opening her eyes and looking around her new home. Clara Alice knew that there was still a long way to go, but she was ready to face the future with courage and optimism. She had survived a devastating betrayal and was emerging stronger, wiser, and more determined to live a full, meaningful life. And so, in the comfort of her new apartment, Clara Alice began a new chapter, full of hope and with an open heart to the infinite possibilities that the future held. The sound of laughter and lively conversation filled the small bistro where Clara Alice and her longtime friends had gathered. The table was filled with delicious dishes and glasses of wine, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere. Sitting among old friends, Clara Alice felt more connected than ever. "It's so good to see you all here," Clara exclaimed, smiling at each familiar face around her. "We miss you, Clara," said Marina, a childhood friend. "We need to do this more often." "Of course," Clara agreed. "I have realized how important it is to maintain these connections. You are my chosen family." Meetings with old friends became a weekly routine. Clara Alice rediscovered the joy of the friendships she had left aside during her marriage. The conversations were sincere, and the mutual support was invaluable. These moments helped her remember that she was loved and valued no matter the challenges she faced. In addition to reconnecting with old friends, Clara Alice began expanding her social circle. She signed up for painting classes, where she met people with similar interests. The painting sessions were not only therapeutic, but also an opportunity to make new friends. "I loved your use of colors in this painting, Clara," commented Juliana, a classmate. "You have an incredible talent." "Thank you, Juliana," Clara replied, feeling encouraged. "I'm learning a lot here, and it's great to meet new people." As time passed, Clara Alice realized that she was transforming. Through these new and old connections, she began to understand the importance of valuing herself and cultivating healthy relationships. During her yoga and meditation practices, Clara Alice took time to reflect on her personal growth. She asked herself important questions. What really matters to me? How can I be kinder to myself? What do I look for in a healthy relationship? These reflections led her to a deeper understanding of herself. Clara Alice began to set clear boundaries in her relationships, ensuring that her emotional needs were met and that she was treated with the respect she deserved. One day, during a walk in the park with Marina, Clara Alice shared her discoveries. "I'm learning so much about myself, Marina. I never realized how essential it is to value yourself before expecting it from others." "That's incredible, Clara. You deserve to be happy and be in relationships that are good for you." Marina smiled, supporting her friend. "I'm proud of you." Over time, Clara Alice began to see significant changes in her life. She felt more confident and secure. His relationships, both old and new, were more balanced and enriching. Friendships not only provided joy, but were also a source of strength and support. On one of these nights, while reflecting on her diary, Clara Alice wrote, "Today, I realized that true love begins within us. I learned to value myself and seek relationships that reflect this self-love. I am grateful for each person who crossed my path, as each one of them taught me something valuable. The journey was not easy, but each step brought me closer to myself." Clara Alice knew that personal reconstruction was an ongoing process, but she was ready to embrace each moment. She was becoming the best version of herself, and this was just the beginning. So, with a light heart and renewed spirit, Clara Alice moved forward with confidence, prepared for whatever the future held. She had found a new balance and a deep understanding of her own strength and worth. And above all, I knew that, surrounded by friends and guided by self-love, I could face any challenge. Clara Alice sat by the window of her new apartment, the afternoon sun filtering through the light curtains and creating a play of light and shadow on the floor. The environment was calm and organized, reflecting the new phase of his life. She felt at peace, a rare and precious feeling that had accompanied her since she began to rebuild her life. While observing the day's activity outside, Clara Alice allowed herself a moment of introspection. "I had been through a profound and transformative journey in recent months, and now I was ready to reflect on everything I had experienced. Looking back, I realize how much I've grown," thought Clara, contemplating the changes that had occurred in her life. "The pain and sadness were intense, but they brought me to a place where I finally feel stronger and more aware of myself." She thought about every step of her journey. The discovery of betrayal, the painful confrontation, and the difficult decision to move on. Each step was a test of her resilience and inner strength, but it was also a path of learning and self-discovery. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Juliana, her painting friend, inviting her for a coffee. "What a great invitation," Clara smiled, responding enthusiastically. "I would definitely love to meet you." As she typed her answer, Clara thought about how her life was transforming. His new hobbies and friendships brought a renewed brightness to his days. And, most importantly, Clara had learned to value herself and set healthy boundaries. "I never thought that such a difficult journey could lead me to such a good place," Clara reflected, looking around the apartment she now called home. However, Clara Alice knew that life was not just about overcoming challenges, but also about being open to new experiences and opportunities. With a lighter heart and clearer mind, she was beginning to consider the possibility of a new relationship. "I'm not in a hurry," thought Clara, as she got up to prepare some tea. I know that finding someone special takes time and should happen naturally. What matters is that I'm ready for it when the time is right. She reflected on the importance of being open to love, but without putting pressure on herself. Clara Alice wanted to be in a relationship that complemented her life, not defined who she was. Her time alone helped her understand what she truly valued and the type of partner she wanted. As the sun began to set, Clara Alice sat on the sofa with a cup of hot tea. The silence of the night brought a feeling of tranquility and hope. "I'm grateful for every experience," Clara said to herself as she looked out the window at the horizon. "Every challenge, every new friendship, every moment of self-care. They got me here, and I'm excited for what the future may bring." She knew the path ahead still had uncertainties, but she was ready to face them with a new perspective and renewed confidence. Clara Alice was finally at peace with the past and optimistic about the future. With a clear mind and an open heart, she looked forward with hope and curiosity to the new adventures and opportunities that life had to offer. And so, with a sense of completeness and gratitude, Clara Alice prepared to embrace the next phase of her life, confident that, no matter what came her way, she would be ready to face the future with courage and joy. Clara Alice's journey is a powerful testament to resilience and self-discovery. After facing the pain of betrayal and the challenge of starting over, she found the strength within herself to rebuild her life and create a more promising future. Her story reminds us that even in the most difficult situations, it is possible to find new beginnings and grow from adversity. If you were inspired by Clara Alice's story, share your reflections in the comments below. We want to know what lessons you learned and how her journey resonated with your own experience. And don't forget to subscribe to our Story and History channel to follow more inspiring stories like this. Stay tuned for our next narrative, where we will reveal an intriguing new plot about secrets and betrayals. Get ready to get involved in a plot full of mysteries and twists that will certainly capture your imagination. Until then,